Okay, so ready to jump into a world with like electric cars that charge crazy fast
Sounds fun.
and clean energy plants that are like miniaturized. It's kind of like a sci-fi movie, but it's
Yeah.
really happening right now. QuantumScape and NuScale Power are both working toward
Oh,
this
they know so far.
future. So, you've been digging into these companies, and
Yeah.
we're here to kind of help make sense of it all.
Yeah, it's a really interesting comparison, especially when you think about how they're both going after that same goal of like a cleaner energy future,
Right.
but they're going about it in totally different ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we have this great article from the Motley Fool published just a couple days ago, December 17th, 2024, and it just lays out a really interesting picture of these two companies.
It does.
And what I think is so interesting is they're both sort of playing in this, very high stakes, like speculative new energy tech world,
Yeah.
but their stock performances are telling completely different stories.
Yeah, one's like taken off. And the other one's been on a wild ride, to say the least.
Totally.
Yeah.
So let's start with QuantumScape. Their big bet is on solid-state batteries for electric vehicles.
Yep.
Now, I kind of get the basics of batteries,
Sure.
but what makes solid-state batteries so different from like the lithium-ion ones that we all have in our,
Right.
devices and cars now?
So think of it like this. Solid-state batteries have the potential to be a lot safer, right? They're less likely to overheat and catch fire, which is obviously a concern with the current lithium ion.
Yeah.
And then they could also charge way faster.
Oh, wow.
Imagine filling up your EV
Right.
in the time it takes to grab a coffee,
Wow.
and on top of that, they could even last a lot longer than the batteries we have now.
Wow, okay.
So if QuantumScape can actually make this happen,
Right.
it could completely change the whole EV market.
Right. Their like flagship QSE5 battery has an energy density of like over 800 watt hours per liter. That's
Yeah.
like way more than the average lithium ion battery, right?
Huge difference. Most lithium-ion batteries are between 300 and 700 watt hours per liter. So the QSE5 is packing way more punch in the same amount of space.
Right, right.
And what's even more encouraging is they're not just talking about it. They've started shipping out these little samples of the QSE5
Nice.
for testing, which shows, they're moving past just the theory and making actual progress.
So it's not just vaporware, it's like
Yeah,
a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know there's always but
Always a but.
their Raptor production process
Yeah.
seems to be kind of a bottleneck right now.
Yeah.
They're saying that their new Cobra process is going to help them scale up production.
Yeah, the Cobra process.
So tell me about this Cobra process. What is that?
It's basically a new way of making the batteries.
Okay.
And QuantumScape says it's the key to making mass production actually happen.
Okay.
The thing is, though, they don't expect to have it up and running till 2025. And then, real mass production won't happen till 2026.
So it's a little bit of a waiting game.
Yeah.
Is that maybe why investors are a little bit hesitant right now, or?
Yeah, I think that uncertainty, along with some pretty tough financial projections, are giving investors some pause.
Yeah.
Their estimates right now show losses of almost $500 million a year every year until 2026. That's when they're hoping to start making some money.
Wow, that's a lot of money to be losing every year.
Yeah, it's a serious burn rate. And
Yeah.
even with their first revenue projected in 2026, it's only going to be around $7 million.
Wow.
So it makes you wonder, how long can their funding actually last
Right.
at that rate?
They do have Volkswagen backing them up, which seems like a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Having a big player like Volkswagen on their side gives them resources and expertise
Yeah.
that most startups can only dream of.
Right.
It's a huge vote of confidence in their tech.
But I'm sure they're not the only ones chasing this solid-state battery, right?
Yeah.
What's the competition like?
Oh, it's crowded. You've got other companies like Blue Solutions making moves.
Yeah.
And then you have the big guys like Toyota and NIO jumping in. Everyone's bringing their own strengths and strategies, which makes it a really dynamic and competitive market.
And that makes me think about their stock plunge, a 96% drop from its peak. It's kind of a reminder that the potential is huge,
Yeah.
but there's also a lot of risk
Yeah, totally.
in betting on a company like this.
It's high stakes.
Yeah.
QuantumScape has amazing technology and a great partner, but they've got tough competition and some serious money challenges.
Yeah. So on one hand, you have QuantumScape pushing the boundaries of battery tech.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we have NuScale Power, and they're focusing on small modular reactors, SMRs.
Yeah.
What are SMRs and, like, why is NuScale so excited about them?
So imagine a nuclear reactor, but like miniaturized. These SMRs, they're prefabricated, designed to be moved around and built on-site, which could make them way cheaper and faster to deploy compared to, those massive traditional nuclear plants.
Right, right.
Yeah.
That seems like that could be a real game changer.
Yeah.
Especially for areas where building a huge nuclear plant just wouldn't be possible.
Exactly.
Right.
And what really sets NuScale apart is they're the only company right now with a standard design approval from the NRC for their 50-megawatt SMR design.
Okay.
That's a big hurdle they've cleared, which gives them a huge advantage in bringing SMRs to market.
So they're ahead of the game in terms of regulatory approval.
Big time.
But you mentioned earlier that they've also had some ups and downs. What's been going on with them?
Oh, for sure. They've had some bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Last year, they had to cancel a big project in Idaho, which led to some layoffs.
Wow.
They're also dealing with an SEC investigation related to those layoffs. So, yeah, they've definitely faced some challenges.
Given those setbacks, what makes you think that NuScale can still succeed?
Well, despite all that, there are some signs that they might be turning a corner. First of all, they just got this huge supply deal with Doosan Enerbility in South Korea for SMR components, and there's a decent chance they'll get a good chunk of funding from the Department of Energy, who are putting a lot of money into SMRs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Are there any other reasons to be optimistic, or is it still, like, too early to tell?
Well, there's one more thing that's got everyone's attention. They've partnered with Amazon.
Amazon.
Yeah.
That's a big name.
Huge.
So what does that partnership look like?
So Amazon is teaming up with Energy Northwest, this group of public utilities, to develop 4 advanced SMRs. These reactors are going to help power Amazon's operations.
Which I'm sure takes a lot of energy.
Tons.
Yeah.
So having Amazon on board not only brings money,
Right.
but it also makes NuScale's vision seem a lot more credible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like a really strategic move for both companies.
For sure.
But what about NuScale's financials? Are they making money yet?
Not yet, but their revenue projections are looking really good. Analysts think their revenue will jump from about $23 million this year to $102 million in 2025.
Wow, that's a big jump.
Yeah, it looks like they're setting themselves up for some serious growth.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember they're still operating at a loss.
Right.
Investing in NuScale is a long game,
Yeah.
and there's still a lot of uncertainty about how they'll become profitable.
Okay, so we've got these two companies, both want a cleaner energy future, but they've got very different approaches, and they're facing some unique challenges. What's your overall take on their paths so far?
Well, both QuantumScape and NuScale are kind of walking a tightrope. They're working with cutting-edge technologies, which, of course, come with a lot of risk.
Right.
But they also have the potential to completely change the world.
This is where it gets so interesting, right? We've got QuantumScape focused on changing how we store and use energy, particularly for transportation, while NuScale is taking on energy generation itself.
Exactly. It's like two sides of the same coin, both working towards sustainability but taking totally different routes to get there. It really highlights the fact that there's no one perfect solution to our energy problems.
Right.
We need innovation on all fronts, and that's what makes this whole conversation so fascinating.
Right. Speaking of fascinating, I remember that the Motley Fool article we're looking at is kind of leaning toward NuScale as the better bet right now.
Yeah.
They highlighted that they have an existing revenue stream, that important NRC certification, those big partnerships.
Right.
But they weren't afraid to point out the challenges either.
Yeah. They did say that even with those advantages, NuScale has a long way to go. They're not profitable yet. And the nuclear industry, even with these smaller designs, is still very complex and expensive.
It's interesting that you mentioned the modular design. The article mentioned NuScale's 50-megawatt design being certified.
Yeah.
And their goal of getting a 77-megawatt design certified by 2025.
Yeah.
What's so important about that higher output?
That jump to 77 megawatts is all about hitting that sweet spot for cost effectiveness. It's the point where their SMRs can really compete with traditional power sources, even going up against fossil fuels like coal. So if they can get that expanded certification, it would be huge for them.
So both companies have these big dates circled on their calendars. 2025 for NuScale's expanded certification and 2026 for QuantumScape's mass production kickoff.
Big years.
These feel like major turning points in this whole race to change the energy landscape.
Yeah, they're definitely milestones to watch, but it's important to remember that both companies are still in the red.
Right.
NuScale might have some revenue, but they're not profitable yet. And QuantumScape is looking at years of losses before they see a dime.
Yeah.
It's a lot of risk for investors, even with the potential for big rewards later on.
It makes you wonder if maybe the market is getting a little bit ahead of itself.
Yeah.
Putting so much emphasis on potential when both companies are still burning through cash.
Yeah, that's a risk you always have with any new technology. The market gets excited about what could be, and sometimes that excitement leads to valuations that aren't really realistic right now.
Right. So that's where due diligence comes in, I guess.
Exactly.
It's not just about the potential upside. It's about really understanding the risks, the challenges, and the timeline to profitability.
Absolutely. It's about looking past the hype and really checking out the fundamentals of the business.
So let's get into those fundamentals a little bit more. What do you see as the biggest challenges for each company?
Okay.
The Motley Fool writer talked about execution being a big hurdle for QuantumScape. But I'm curious to get your take.
For QuantumScape, it all comes down to proving they can actually do what they're saying.
Okay.
They need to show that their Cobra process can actually scale up production.
Right.
And that they can make a product that's good enough and at a price that makes sense.
Right.
And they have to do all of this while competing with some pretty fierce rivals.
The competition in the battery space sounds pretty intense. What are some of the specific challenges that QuantumScape is facing from, companies like Toyota and NIO?
Well, take Toyota, for example. They're a giant in the car industry with decades of experience in manufacturing and a global supply chain.
Right.
They're going all in on a different kind of solid-state battery.
Right.
And they have deep pockets and a ton of influence, which makes them a really tough competitor.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about NIO? What are they doing?
NIO is known for being innovative with their battery tech, especially their battery as a service model. Users can swap out their dead batteries for fully charged ones.
Oh, wow.
At special stations.
Interesting.
This could give them an edge when it comes to convenience and affordability.
Right.
Especially as this battery swapping infrastructure grows.
So QuantumScape has to not only make their technology perfect, but also outmaneuver some really smart and well-funded competitors.
Yeah, it's a tightrope walk.
It really is.
But the flip side is if they figure out solid-state batteries, the payoff could be huge.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where EVs are the norm, charging takes no time, and range anxiety is a thing of the past.
Yeah, that's a future worth working towards.
For sure.
What about NuScale? What are the biggest obstacles they need to get over?
For NuScale, it's less about technology and more about navigating the complexities of the nuclear industry.
Right.
Even with their smaller, modular designs, they still need to convince regulators and the public that their SMRs are safe, reliable, and good for the environment. Public perception of nuclear energy, especially after things like Fukushima, is still a big challenge.
That's a really good point. Even if the technology is sound, public opinion can make or break a project, especially when it comes to nuclear power.
Totally.
Right.
NuScale has a lot of work to do to teach people about the safety of SMRs, how they're different from traditional reactors, and why this tech is a good solution for a cleaner energy future.
I remember reading about some of the safety features of SMRs. They're supposed to be inherently safer than traditional reactors, right? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so SMRs have these passive safety features that use natural forces like gravity and convection to cool the reactor core if there's an emergency.
Oh, wow.
This reduces the need for active systems and people having to intervene.
Okay.
They're also smaller, so they have less radioactive material, which makes the potential consequences of an accident less severe.
So they've got these multiple layers of safety built in.
Right.
But what about nuclear waste? That's always a concern with nuclear power.
Yeah.
How does NuScale deal with that?
NuScale's SMRs produce less waste than traditional reactors. And they're looking into advanced recycling technologies that could reduce the waste even more.
Oh, interesting.
They're also pushing for a more centralized way to manage waste with dedicated facilities for safe long-term storage.
So they're trying to address those concerns head on.
Yeah.
But it's still something they need to win over public opinion on.
Oh, absolutely.
It's interesting how both QuantumScape and NuScale are tackling these big, complex challenges, but from such different angles.
Yeah, it shows how innovation can take many forms.
Right.
QuantumScape is about changing how we use energy, and NuScale is trying to revolutionize how we make it.
It's like a two-pronged approach to a more sustainable future.
Yeah.
But even with their different paths, both companies have had their setbacks.
Yeah.
We talked about QuantumScape's stock drop and NuScale's canceled project and layoffs. It's a reminder that innovation is rarely a straight line to success.
Yeah.
There will be bumps, and it's how companies deal with those challenges that really determines if they'll succeed or fail.
That's a great point. It's not enough to have a great idea.
Right.
You need to be resilient, adaptable, and have the resources to get through those inevitable tough times that come with changing an industry.
Totally.
Resilience is key, and it's something we see in both QuantumScape and NuScale. They've both faced big setbacks, but they keep pushing forward, refining their tech, making partnerships.
And working toward their goals.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what keeps them going.
Yeah.
Is it just the money? Or is there something more to it?
Yeah.
I think it's a mix of things. Of course, there's the financial incentive.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a real desire to make a difference, to be part of something bigger.
Yeah.
These are companies trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Right.
And that sense of purpose can be really powerful.
It's really inspiring to see that level of passion and determination, especially when things are tough.
I know, right?
It shows that even when there are setbacks, innovation can still thrive when people believe in a better future.
Absolutely. I think that's what makes this whole discussion so interesting. It's not just about numbers and market trends.
Yeah.
It's about the human side of innovation, that drive to create something new, push boundaries, and make a positive impact on the world.
It reminds us that behind all the data and predictions, there are real people working hard to make these visions happen. So it's been quite a journey, exploring the worlds of QuantumScape and NuScale Power.
Yeah.
We talked about their amazing tech, their ambitious goals, and the very real challenges they're facing.
Right.
What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners as they continue to research these companies?
I think the main takeaway is this. Investing in either QuantumScape or NuScale Power is like betting on the future.
Okay.
We're talking about technologies that could completely change the energy landscape, but both companies are still dealing with a lot of risk and uncertainty.
So it's not just about understanding the potential rewards. It's about carefully weighing those rewards against the risks.
Exactly.
What advice would you give to someone thinking about investing in this space?
I would say, first and foremost, do your research. Don't get caught up in the hype. Look beyond the headlines.
Right.
Dig into the details of their technology, their financials, their competition, and the regulations they face. Really understand the challenges and the timelines involved.
So basically, take a step back and don't let excitement cloud your judgment.
Exactly.
But even if someone's not planning on buying stock in either company, their stories are really insightful when it comes to the broader energy transition that's happening right now.
Absolutely. QuantumScape and NuScale are two different paths towards a cleaner energy future.
Right.
And their stories raise some really interesting questions.
Like, we talked about QuantumScape's focus on revolutionizing energy storage.
Right.
And NuScale's goal to change energy generation. Are there any other key differences that come to mind?
I think one big difference is how mature their technologies are. Solid-state batteries are promising, but they're still pretty early in their development. There are a lot of technical challenges to overcome before they become mainstream. Nuclear power, though, has been around for ages, and while SMRs are a newer version, the basic principles are well established.
So investing in QuantumScape is kind of like betting on a more disruptive, maybe higher reward technology, while NuScale is more of an incremental, maybe lower risk approach.
That's a good way to put it. And it's important to think about your own investment style and risk tolerance when making these decisions.
It's a good reminder that there's no right answer for everyone.
For sure.
What might be a great investment for one person might not be right for another. It depends on their situation and what they prefer.
Exactly. That's why doing your own research is so important.
Right.
Don't just rely on what you hear from others.
Yeah.
Even from experts like me.
Even from me.
Do your own digging and form your own opinions based on the facts.
We've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
We have.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought you want to leave them with?
I'd say this. The future of energy is being written right now.
Yeah.
And it's a future full of possibilities.
I love that.
Companies like QuantumScape and NuScale are pushing the limits of what's possible, and whether they succeed or fail will have a big impact on our world.
It's a story that's still being written, and it's one we should all be paying attention to.
I really agree.
Whether you're a serious investor, just curious about this stuff, or someone who cares about the planet, this energy transition is something we should all be aware of.
Absolutely. It's a time of huge change and opportunity.
Yeah.
It's time to get involved, stay informed, and get excited about what the future holds.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a really fun discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Sounds good. Yeah, it really shows that there isn't like one solution for all of our energy problems.
Right.
You know, we need innovation all over the place, and that's what makes this whole conversation so interesting.
And speaking of interesting, I remember the Motley Fool article, the one we're using,
Yeah.
sort of leaned toward NuScale as the better bet right now.
Huh?
They talked about them having an existing revenue stream, that really important NRC certification,
Yeah.
and, those big name partnerships.
Right.
But they didn't shy away from the challenges either.
No, they definitely acknowledge that NuScale still has a way to go. They're not making a profit yet.
Right.
And the nuclear industry, even with these smaller designs, is still a really tough and expensive business.
It's interesting that you mentioned the modular design. The article talked about NuScale's 50-megawatt design being certified and their goal of getting a 77-megawatt design certified by 2025.
Yeah.
What's the big deal about that higher output? Why is that so important?
That jump to 77 megawatts is all about being cost effective.
Okay.
It's the point where their SMRs become a real competitor to traditional power sources,
Right.
even challenging fossil fuels like coal.
Wow.
So if they can get that certification for the bigger design, it would be a huge win for them.
So they both have these crucial dates coming up, 2025 for NuScale's expanded certification and 2026 for QuantumScape's mass production. These feel like major turning points in this race to change the energy world.
Yeah, they're definitely big milestones to keep an eye on, but remember, both companies are still operating at a loss.
Right.
NuScale has revenue coming in, but they're not profitable. And QuantumScape is looking at years of losses before they even see $1 in profit.
Yeah.
It's a lot of risk for investors to handle, even though there's potential for big rewards in the future.
It makes you think, is the market maybe getting a little too excited?
Maybe a little.
Putting so much emphasis on potential when both companies are still spending a lot of money?
That's always a risk with new technologies.
Right.
People get excited about the possibilities, and sometimes that leads to valuations that aren't quite in line with reality.
Right. That's where due diligence comes in.
Exactly.
It's not just about the potential. It's about really understanding the risks, the challenges, and the time it'll take to become profitable.
Absolutely. It's about looking past the hype and really getting into the nitty-gritty of the business.
Okay, so let's dig into those fundamentals a bit more.
Okay.
What do you see as the biggest challenges for each company? The Motley Fool writer highlighted execution as a big hurdle for QuantumScape.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about your perspective.
So for QuantumScape, it comes down to proving that they can actually do what they're promising.
Okay.
They need to show that their Cobra process can actually scale up production.
Right.
And that they can make a product that works well and is priced competitively.
Right.
And they have to do all of this while facing some really tough competitors.
The competition in the battery space sounds intense.
Oh, it is.
What are some of the specific challenges they're facing from, companies like Toyota and NIO?
Well, Toyota, for example, is a giant in the car industry.
Right.
They've been around for decades. They have a ton of manufacturing experience and a global supply chain.
Right.
They're betting big on a different type of solid-state battery.
Okay.
And they have the money and influence to be a serious threat.
Right.
Yeah.
What about NIO? What's their approach?
NIO is known for their innovation in battery tech, especially their battery as a service model, where users can swap out their empty batteries for full ones.
Right, at those stations.
Yeah, exactly.
So that gives them a bit of a competitive edge.
It could, especially in terms of convenience and cost.
Right.
Particularly as that battery swapping infrastructure keeps growing.
So QuantumScape not only has to perfect their technology, but also outmaneuver some really smart and well-funded competitors.
Yep, it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But on the other hand, if they manage to crack the code for solid-state batteries, the rewards could be massive.
Right.
Imagine electric vehicles becoming the standard, charging times drastically reduced, no more range anxiety.
That's definitely a future worth aiming for.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what about NuScale then? What are some of the biggest obstacles they need to overcome?
For NuScale, the challenges are less about the technology itself and more about navigating the nuclear industry.
Yeah.
Even with their smaller, modular designs, they still need to convince regulators and the public that their SMRs are safe, reliable, and environmentally friendly.
Right.
And public perception of nuclear energy, especially after events like Fukushima, remains a significant challenge.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Even if the technology is great, public opinion can make or break a project, especially when it comes to nuclear power.
Absolutely.
Right.
NuScale has a lot of work to do to educate people about how safe SMRs are,
Okay.
how they're different from traditional reactors, and why they believe this technology is a good solution for a cleaner future.
I remember reading about some of the safety features built into SMRs.
Yeah,
They're designed to be inherently safer than traditional reactors, right?
that's right.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure, SMRs incorporate these passive safety features that use natural forces like gravity and convection to cool the reactor core in case of an emergency.
Okay.
So they don't rely as much on active systems
Right.
or human intervention.
Right.
And their smaller size means they contain less radioactive material, which reduces the potential consequences of an accident.
So they've got these multiple layers of safety built in.
Yeah, which is important.
Right.
But then there's the issue of nuclear waste.
Yeah, that's always a big concern with nuclear power.
It is.
How does NuScale address that?
Well, NuScale's SMRs actually produce less waste compared to traditional reactors.
Okay.
And they're also looking into advanced recycling technologies to reduce that amount even further.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and they're advocating for a more centralized approach to waste management, with dedicated facilities designed for safe, long-term storage.
So they're really trying to address those concerns head on.
Yes, but it's a hurdle they'll need to overcome in the public eye.
It's fascinating how both QuantumScape and NuScale are tackling these huge challenges, but from such different angles.
It really illustrates how innovation can take so many different forms.
Right.
QuantumScape is focused on revolutionizing how we use energy, while NuScale is trying to revolutionize how we generate it.
It's a two-pronged approach to creating a more sustainable future.
Exactly.
But despite their different paths, both companies have faced their share of setbacks.
Yeah, for sure.
We talked about QuantumScape's stock plunge and NuScale's project cancellation and layoffs.
Yeah, those were tough times.
It reminds us that innovation is rarely a smooth upward trajectory.
It's true.
There are bound to be bumps in the road, and it's how companies navigate those challenges that ultimately determines their success or failure. That's a really important point.
It is.
It's not just about having a brilliant idea.
Right.
It's about having the resilience,
Yes.
the adaptability, and the resources to weather the inevitable storms that come with disrupting an industry.
You have to be able to bounce back.
Yeah.
And that's something we see in both QuantumScape and NuScale.
Yeah.
They've both faced major setbacks,
Right.
but they're still pushing forward, refining their technologies, securing partnerships, working towards their goals.
It makes you wonder what drives that kind of commitment.
Yeah.
Is it purely financial, or is there something more at play here?
I think it's a combination of factors.
Yeah.
Of course, there's the financial incentive, but I also think there's a genuine desire to make a difference, to be a part of something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
These are companies trying to solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
Right.
And that sense of purpose can be a powerful motivator.
It's inspiring to see that kind of passion and determination,
It is.
especially when the odds are stacked against them.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even in the face of setbacks, innovation can thrive when people believe in a better future.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this whole discussion so compelling.
Me too.
It's not just about analyzing numbers and market trends.
Right.
It's about exploring the human side of innovation, the drive to create something new, to push boundaries, and to leave a positive impact on the world.
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
It's a reminder that behind all the data and projections, there are real people working tirelessly to make these visions a reality.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's really been fascinating, digging into QuantumScape and NuScale Power.
Yeah, really.
We've covered so much. Their tech, their goals, those big challenges they're facing.
Right.
As our listeners keep researching these companies, what are some of the key takeaways they should keep in mind?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that investing in either QuantumScape or NuScale Power is a bet on the future.
Okay.
We're talking about game-changing technologies that could reshape everything about energy.
Right.
But both companies are still navigating a lot of risk and uncertainty.
So it's not just about understanding the potential upside.
Right.
It's also about carefully weighing those potential rewards against the very real risks.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to someone who's considering investing in this space? Like, where do they even start?
I'd say first and foremost, do your homework. Don't get swept up in the hype. Look past the headlines and get into the nitty-gritty. Their technology, their financials, their competition, the regulatory landscape.
So it's all about taking a measured approach
Yeah.
and not letting excitement cloud your judgment.
Yeah.
But even if someone isn't planning to buy stock in either company, Their stories are really insightful.
They are.
They offer a glimpse into the bigger energy transition that's happening right now.
Absolutely. QuantumScape and NuScale represent two distinct paths toward a cleaner energy future.
Right.
And I think their stories raise some really thought-provoking questions.
Like we talked about QuantumScape focusing on revolutionizing energy storage and NuScale trying to transform energy generation. What other key differences stand out to you?
One major difference is the maturity of their technologies. Solid-state batteries, while promising, are still in their early stages.
Okay.
There are still a lot of technical hurdles to overcome before they hit the mainstream.
Right.
Nuclear power, on the other hand, has been around for decades.
Yeah, much longer.
And while SMRs are a newer, more advanced type of reactor, the underlying principles are well established.
So in a way, investing in QuantumScape is like betting on a more disruptive, maybe higher reward technology, whereas NuScale represents a more incremental, perhaps lower risk approach.
That's a great way to put it. And it's really important for people to consider their own investment philosophy and risk tolerance when making these decisions.
It's a good reminder that there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to investing.
Exactly.
What might be a fantastic investment for one person might not be suitable for someone else.
Absolutely. It all comes down to individual circumstances and preferences.
Yeah.
That's why doing your own research is so important.
Right.
Don't just take someone else's word for it, even if they seem like an expert.
Right.
Take the time to form your own opinions based on solid information.
Yeah. It's about becoming an informed investor.
Exactly.
Well, we've certainly given our listeners a lot to think about today.
We have.
As we wrap up this deep dive, is there one final thought you'd like to leave them with?
I'd say the future of energy is being written right now. And it's a future brimming with possibilities.
It really is.
Companies like QuantumScape and NuScale are pushing the boundaries of innovation.
Yeah.
And whether they succeed or stumble will have a significant impact on our world.
It's a story that's still unfolding, and it's definitely a story worth following.
Couldn't agree more.
Whether you're a seasoned investor, just casually interested, or simply someone who cares about the planet.
Yeah.
The energy transition is something we should all be paying attention to.
Absolutely. It's a time of immense change and opportunity.
Right, yeah.
It's a time to be engaged, informed, and excited about the possibilities that lie ahead.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it has. And to our listeners, be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive into the world of emerging tech.